Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the RENNSPORT community events. And today we will have a new car at a new track, or two new cars actually at a new track with a lot of new features. And well, you already know the guest we have today, and he's not really a guest because he will join us for more and more time. But I'm also not alone again because Tim Ireland is here with me in the booth.
Hey Lino, how are you doing? I've never been in the community event booth before. It's kind of posh.
Yeah, that's...
Do you get snacks? I get snacks.
I don't. Maybe I should think about that. That's something to consider for in the future. But of course, new cars with the Hypercar class newly being added to RENNSPORT about last week Thursday. That means we will have the Porsche 963 and the BMW M Hybrid fighting out on Fuji International Speedway, which is of course also newly released with the 8.5 add-on as low retro. This goes hard into the wall in qualifying right now. And
yeah, Fuji's a really good track on the Hypercar. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, really good on the Hypercar, even though we see quite a few drivers struggle already. But
it takes a bit of getting used to.
Yeah, it does take a lot of getting used to. And especially in this race format, it will be the longest race we've ever won on a RENNSPORT community event, even though we don't have as many cars still on track as we had the last times around. It might still be a very interesting race due to strategy calls. I've already known from Ladler what he's trying to do. I will not tell it yet because that might give an unfair advantage to other drivers, of course. But you will have to make a pit stop. The fuel consumption isn't lowered, and you can roughly do 25 to 30 minutes on the starting fuel you have in this car. Therefore, having to refuel and go to the pits, and that's the new feature I mentioned before. Doing a pit stop in this game is now possible, and you can change tires, you can refuel, you can repair your car, whatever it is that you need to do. And yeah, do you want to tell us more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we added pit stops with the 1.85 version, and I think it's really opened up what we can do as a race format, and allowed us a bit more variety in how we do things, especially with the multi-class racing that's been put in now. I think it's going to allow us to do more generic kind of GT3 racing as well as hypercar racing, like do a more kind of realistic real-world 1 hour format with a pit stop, which I think will really start to let the sim shine, especially with the tyre model how it is, and how looking after your tires is pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, you already want to go into a certain direction, I see, because you also have something to announce, I guess, later on. We have lots of stuff to talk about later in this race, so it definitely won't get boring. But for now, maybe we should concentrate on qualifying. We are now on the third flying lap for Tim Schroeder, who of course had that spin in turn 1 on his first flying lap, which led to him being 4 seconds down on Ladler. But I think it will be very interesting between Ladler and Schroeder, as well as between Loreto and Almeida. We know all of them, so all of them have been racing in either RCLs or RCEs. And I think pace-wise, there could be two main battles coming our way.
Yeah, I think Schroeder and Ladler could definitely be a battle between those two. And I think it'll be hopefully be a fairly interesting one that's going on, especially with the pit stops, and see how that changes things around a bit. Pit stops are still pretty new, and people aren't too used to them, so I'm not expecting them to be slick, straight in, straight out pit stops. We'll see.
Meanwhile, the gap between Schroeder and Lala only 3 tenths, but now it's Lala making the mistakes into turn 1. Loreto is on his outlap. And he's, of course, the lone BMW in this race. And I think it's cool to see both cars on track, actually. We had a 24-car test session 1 week ago. And there we had a GT3 and LMDH multi-class race here at Fuji, which was very interesting as well. I think it was won by Nico Nunninghoff in LMDH in a BMW. And you've seen lots of different situations between those two classes, so I'm sure we will see more. We will see more multi-class action in the near future. And it's
interesting how similar the Porsche and the BMW, the lap times come out, but how they drive quite differently as well. I think that the BMW, for me at least, seems to be a safer drive. But people who can use the Porsche seem to really be able to get a pace out of it.
Yeah, it's very comparable to GT3, I think, in that way. You have so many different driving styles between, for example, the Porsche, the Audi, and the BMW. They are completely different cars. In a Hypercar, if you look at them without really knowing what's under the hood, under the engine cover, let's say, it's hard to tell the differences, but if you drive them, they are so different and unique in their own regard. So it's definitely important to test all of them to really get the most of the car that you want to drive, as Loreto's now putting in his first flying lap time. Let's see what it will be. If it's valid though, so doesn't seem to be valid though. But it's still Tim Schroeder.
I've got a time on the table yet.
Got roughly 4 minutes left to go in the session, so can get 2 or 3 laps in, depending on where you are on the track.
Yeah, as long as they haven't done anything too bad and heated the rear tyres up. Which, as you'll know, is it can be... it's a problem that lasts for a few corners. If you have a little spin, your tyres go red. You have to really take it careful for a while until they cool down.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you're talking about right now, what we see from Armeda there. It's just, of course, these cars have a lot of power, really a lot of power. And being too eager on the throttle can easily lead to you spinning out and compromising yourself for the dust, which is that's Lala going right and also adding up the rears. So people are struggling more than I would have thought, to be honest.
Yeah, especially from Ladler, I would have thought he would have been a bit more in control, but he's maybe pushing a bit more to try and catch up with Schroeder. The last corner can, with the weight change, it can make the back end a bit skittish.
And it seems like Loreto's also coming, so that's basically your qualifying. No, he actually isn't. There was a bit of a scam there by the Portuguese driver. And you can actually see them practicing pit stops there, Ladler and Armeda. So in this case, they both change tires. You'll see what they do during the race.
Okay. I know it's a bit unfortunate that the pit crew got taken out of the update at the last minute, but so it is a bit trickier to spot your pit box, but it still really adds a lot to the race, and hopefully we'll see those little guys back soon.
Indeed. But of course there's still lots to come for future updates.
Yeah, there's a lot in the pipeline, a lot we can't talk about, but it's there, trust me.
But on the other hand, qualifying is coming to a close now, so Loreto might be able to finish that lap, even though I don't think it will be a valid one. As he went wide in the last turn before. And that's indeed end of the session.
Yep. That last sector in Fuji is a bit of a killer.
Yeah, it is very tricky, especially if you go uphill and then you have like this small crest in the left-hander. And it basically launches you up a bit. It's very tricky to get right.
Yeah, it's just when you're trying to get the power down as you're coming round and over the hill. And then the back end de-weights, and it doesn't take a lot to put you in a spin.
But as the driver now get ready for the race start, you will get back with footage. And there we can see them making their way to the start-finish line following the safety car. More closely or less closely, it doesn't matter now, it matters on the start-finish straight. But it's Tim Schroeder in front of Dominik Ladler.
Yeah, the safety car's way out in front at the minute.
It's very cool that they use the Mission R as a safety car, I think. It's very unique in its own way. There you can see it pull into the pits. It's Tim Schroeder to the left. And Dominik Ladler to the right, the BMW behind, driven by Loreto. Bit of a gap to Almeida, but otherwise looks good. And we go racing in Fuji for a 40-minute race to the line. And it's a good start by Schroeder. Dominik Ladler seems to not have had the best start into this race, but it's a huge dive down the outside by Dominik Ladler. I think it was Loreto going a bit wide there. And now being passed by Almeida. And it's Tim Schroeder still having the lead after turn 1.
Yeah, he seems to have got a fairly good start there. Ladler made a bit of a move, but it didn't pay off. Schroeder will be trying to settle down now, hopefully getting a bit of a pace for the rest of the race. He's got a decent gap. It's not massive, but I think it's comfortable for him.
I think it will be very interesting to see what he does in terms of pit stops. Of course, overcutting, undercutting, both are options you can take, depending on how well you are with the tires. We know that Ladler can be very good on his tires. It's as Almeida going in a bit hot for the chicane, and that's Loreto going down the inside, now the outside. And up into third.
Seems to have made that move stick. He's giving plenty of space there, but just in case there was a dive, but it was nice of him.
One thing I really like about the BMW, and maybe we can get to talking about the cars a bit later as well, but one thing I really love is like that LED number or position board. If you look in front of the rear wheel arch, that actually changes, and well, depending on where you are on the track, that's very nice detail.
Yeah, I know in WEC the hypercars have lights on, don't they, for if they're in first, second, or third. But yeah, having the digital number board is really good. It's more of a GT3 thing that we see in real cars, but it's nice.
I think they use this in IMSA though, so
yeah, they may be doing IMS as well. Yeah.
But we see Dominik... Oh wait, there has been a lead change because Dominik Ladler's in the lead of Tim Schroeder. Not sure what happened there, we completely missed that and all the action further behind. So probably Tim Schroeder did a massive mistake there, losing out roughly 3 seconds and also having to live with the consequences of the tires.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's...
Oh! And that's Ladler doing a similar move, I think.
Maybe it was similar what happened to Tim Schroeder. Who knows? But yeah, getting settled into rhythm is very important in those cars. As you see, it's very easy to do mistake. You know that Dominik Ladler is one of the very best in terms of the community races. He's won multiple leagues and well, usually you don't see him do mistakes like that.
No, they're maybe being a bit more casual with the the field as it is at the minute. But yeah, it's not a usual thing to see Ladler making, or Schroeder, to be honest, making that many mistakes early on.
Well, so does this work for Schroeder as well. So we're going a bit wide here. I made it sticking more to the inside. Meanwhile, Joachim Thunder in chat again, as per usual. Also being a bit confused by this whole thing. Let's hope he will be able to race sooner or later again.
Yeah, hopefully see Joachim back soon. He's certainly a character, and he's good on track. It's always fun to race with Joachim on board.
But Ameda is having a very good run here on Loreto.
Ooh, bit wide there. So making up a bit of time. Maybe thinking about making a move into the start-finish straight. See if he can set him up in the last couple of corners of Sector 3.
He's been very close.
Get a bit closer.
Yeah.
No. Oh, no. Loreto ran a lot wide there. Really closed the gap up if Armady can get a decent...
Oh, they're side by side now, exiting the last turn. I think Armeda also had a bit better run there than the BMW.
Yeah.
They're pretty equal on performance in terms of straights.
It's got the inside line coming into the first turn.
That would be very interesting now. You can hang it around the outside in Fuji. That's definitely something you can do. And it's Loreto braking a bit later.
Oh, no.
Oh, but Loreto, yeah, that was way too late for him. But that's
I was
not
expecting him to break a little bit later with him being on the outside, but that was maybe a bit more late than it should have been for a decent move.
Well, that's only one move now done, basically. Still have quite the way to go, so...
Yeah, true. And I'm sure they're all feeling the effects on their tyres. I think everyone's had a bit of an incident there, so... I'm sure down the straights, the flat spots are starting to kick in.
Of course, the flat spots are, well, especially if you have a direct drive wheel, you feel it. If you have a non-direct drive, such as the Logitech G29 or G920, you can actually hear that more than you can feel it.
Yes. Yeah, I have a direct drive wheel, but I had a quick release on it before that was a bit loose, and the flat spots would make an unholy amount of noise. But I've managed to get that fixed now, and I definitely feel it more than anything. Numb hands by the end of a 45-minute race.
Well,
if you skip.
Yeah, of course these cars don't have ABS. It's for those who are not very familiar with the hypercars and the complete class behind it. They do have traction control, but they don't have ABS, so you have to modulate your brake going into turns at speeds very high, so they can hit very high top speeds on the straight, way past 300 kilometers per hour, probably more like 330, 340. Going down into
like
turn
that.
1, very hard braking zone. Fortunately, Fuji is not as bumpy as, let's say, Orchard Road.
No, that's true. It's a fairly modern circuit that's pretty smooth. But yeah, those hard braking zones, it's when you first go into it, you can brake really hard, but these hypercars brake pretty quickly, and the downforce starts to bleed off, and you've got to start pulling back on the brake pedal. Otherwise, you just go straight into it through a corner.
So we are now on board with Tim Schroeder. Can actually see what his top speed will be. We don't know his ERS deployment, which of course also has a huge role in that. But we can see 314 on the straights. G3 speeds are about 270 to 80, so that's a big jump.
Yeah. If you zoom in a bit on the Porsche steering wheel, you can see the deployment mode on it. It is on the screen on the steering wheel, but it is in quite small lettering, so it's difficult to see.
Meanwhile, the gap between Tim Schroeder and Dominic Lala has pretty much stayed the same. Sometimes Dominic Lala is gaining on Tim Schroeder a bit, but it's not significant. In terms of pit stops, if you decide to only refuel and not change tires, you will gain about 25 to 30 seconds. Depending on your parking skills, of course, but that's roughly the time you will lose out. So if, for example, Almeida decides to not change tires in this moment, Schroeder and Lala do, he will be in first, even though by only a slight margin. But
do you have any idea how much they need to refuel in this race?
They do start with 45 liters, and this is about enough to cover 25 minutes. So they have to refuel at least 35 liters. Of course, each driver will do their own math in that case, but it's not a big amount compared to other classes, other races.
40 liters is about 10 seconds in a GT3 car. I'm assuming the refueling time is the same for the hypercars. I don't know.
Yeah,
know if they have different rates.
As we also got Kim Overmark in the chat, by the way, the king of refueling.
So yeah, a full swap with tires will be about 37 seconds. Stationary, not pit entry to pit exit. So we should be able to see from looking at their pit stops whether they take tires or not.
Indeed. But until this will be the case, it's still a bit of time. We only got 10 minutes covered. So you still have 30 left to go. I think we will see the first pit stops at earliest halfway, so in another 10 minutes. In the meantime,
I think if anyone's taking tires, they're going to be pitting in the next 10-15 minutes, aren't they?
Yeah. It's probably the best to just change halfway if you need to. Meanwhile, I just had a bit of a look at Tim Schroeder's tires. And into turn 1, you could actually see the front right wheel locking a bit. Car lifts off on the front right, gets light, and if you press or have too much brake bias forward and press too much brake, the front is locking, and that of course doesn't help with flat spots. Maybe we see it again. No, not this time, even though he had a bit of an oversteer moment. But talking about all that pit stop endurance stuff, meanwhile Loreto got back into third. So he got past Almeida of a mistake because Almeida suddenly lost a lot of time. But you were talking about all that endurance pit stop stuff. You also want to make an announcement, I guess, today. So maybe this is now the perfect time to do so.
Yeah, not many. Some of you who have been around in the beta for a long time will maybe remember that I used to run the RENNSPORT weekly leagues a long time ago. I think I've had about a year of hiatus since then. But with the pit stops and the longer races coming back, I've decided to reinvigorate that. And our first race will be on Tuesday, which is a 60-minute race in GT3 cars, which is more of a traditional GT3 sprint format. But hopefully, I think with the pit stops, we could have some really interesting racing out of it.
Well, indeed, the GT3s and LMDH cars are, of course, on our newest tire model. So, running longer distances. Well, speaking is not my biggest skill today, but longer distances are not a big issue anymore in that regard. We talked about the tire model for a long time in the last few events because there just have been so many improvements to try out. But
yeah, the tire model has definitely improved since the 1.83 update. It's been it's been a lot of fun driving the GT3s, and I'm less of a hypercar guy, but I've been enjoying driving the hypercars as well.
So that's definitely something, if you are interested in longer races especially, to check out. Because apparently there's also keys in the chat if you ask for them in the Twitch chat. So if you are watching on YouTube, there's a link to Twitch down below. If you are on Twitch, just send a message into chat. So we seemingly also have quite a good view count today, which is always
Awesome.
nice to see. As AMD is hunting down Loreto slowly but surely. I think for them, both of them, they will take tires, to be honest. After their excursions, they might be better off doing so.
Yeah, they've both had a fairly serious off, so I think it'd probably be good for them to take tyres. I'm sure the wrists will thank them later.
Yeah, indeed. Meanwhile, Tim Schreider is having such a good time in this car. I think he's still... he had a victory in the RENNSPORT Community League. I think it would be his first RCE win. And winning against the Dominic Lala is quite the achievement, I guess. So, he's looking strong.
Last lap was the fastest lap of the race as well, a 1:29, dead.
Yeah.
So he's definitely getting to grips with the car and enjoying driving it.
I'm not sure what he drove last Saturday. Might have been LMDH as well, or Hypercar. Of course, the Saturday race was won by Nico Nüninghoff, as said previously, in Hypercar. And I actually won in GT3, even though that was more down to a bit of luck and most people getting a drive-through. So, but I'm not gonna complain.
Your own cast.
Gotta represent, mate.
Yeah, the Schroeder and Ladler are down to about half fuel now. So, what's that? 15 minutes into the race, so that it can maybe last a bit longer. But if they're thinking of changing tires, they should probably start to think about coming in sometime in the next 4 or 5 minutes, just so they can get the most use out of it. Fresh set of rubber.
Indeed. I mean, we will see that once we hit halftime, if they're gonna come in or not.
Yeah.
On the other hand, of course, you play it safe. As long as you feel good with the tires, you can stay out and have the better set of tires in the later stages of the race, basically. Especially in Tim Schreider's position, he's 16 seconds ahead of Dominic Ladler. He can definitely afford to put on new tires at this stage.
Yeah, he might as well. But this battle between Loreto and AMD seems to be getting going again.
Yeah, down to roughly 2 seconds, or less than 2 seconds now.
I don't know if Loreto had a bit of a bad lap, or if AMD's caught up with him, to be honest. I know it was down to a second before, but they seem to be having a bit of action at the back of the race. It has definitely become a two car races right now.
Yeah, indeed. But on the other hand, of course, it's also down to consistency, and Loreto seems to be very consistent. AMD is probably a bit faster here, but he just can't seem to find that consistency that Loreto has. Once he gets into a good position, he does one mistake that really cost him the advantage he had. And of course, not only in terms of time, but also in terms of tire life, and that compromises him for, at worst, a lap, at best, a couple of corners. So
yeah, AMD has got a bit of a fastest lap than Loreto. He's got about 0.8 seconds pace on him. So he's definitely got the pace there, but yeah, I think it's a bit of a consistency issue with catching up with him, making the pass, and then making a gap out of it.
Tim Schreider's also about to lap them fairly soon, actually. Which is also very interesting to see, but he's just having such a consistently good pace. And you can actually see that how confident he can turn into the corners, get out of them without getting the car too loose. I think he's having a blast out there.
Yeah, he seems to be enjoying himself, that's for sure. But yeah, it's getting into a rhythm with the hypercars is, I think, very important, because it's so easy to make a mistake and screw your tires up. I think it's important for you to find your rhythm, find your pace, sit there. Oh, and Tim Schroeder's done another fastest lap, so he seems to be doing that pretty well. He's got about a second on Dominic Ladler at the minute, which is maybe a bit more than I would have expected, to be honest. I thought the gap between those two would have been a bit closer.
Maybe he's currently just channeling his inner Kevin Estre for this race specifically.
But yes, again, you never know. Ladler might. They both seem to have some kind of incident early on, and maybe Ladler's carrying a bit more of a flat spot than Schroeder is.
Gap between Loreto and Amede has come down to roughly 1.5 seconds. So that's what we were talking about previously.
Yeah.
As we now approach halftime as well, Tim Schroeder is of course not coming in yet. Would be very surprised if he did. I also think Dominic Ladler, not even depending on if he changes tires or not, even though I suspect he will still remain to only change fuel, will stay out as long as possible to get the car as light as possible. As you said previously in the stream, 10 liters of fuel are roughly a tenth in G3. Not a tenth, a bit more than that. But in hypercars, of course, that effect is even bigger.
Yeah, people, they're all going to want to get their tanks as empty as possible before they have to refuel. It's just whether or not they end up taking... Ooh, running a bit wide there.
Didn't lose too much time. So
that was into Dunlop corner, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more if they want to get as little fuel as possible before they refuel, but anyone wanting to take tyres isn't going to want to leave it too late. Otherwise, you're not going to get the use out of the new set of tyres that you would if you took them somewhere around the middle.
I'm also thinking Loreto's coming in this lap because he's just so far to the right, which is very unusual. You don't really see that often by drivers doing that. But
yeah, he's confused me a couple of laps doing that. I'm thinking that's a very early defensive line.
I mean, on the other hand, Ahmed is also not following him, so he doesn't really isn't really interested on that slipstream, even though it's not that big from 1.5 seconds back anyway, as you can already see Tim Schroeder in the background behind the two cars.
Do you think Schroeder will pit rather than having to deal with traffic?
I'm not sure about that. If he catches them in the right moment on the straight, it might actually be a good gain for him as well, even though he'll probably get past Amede before that. And they can already see him flashing the light. He has been...
It's not a lot of traffic, let's be fair.
That's not. He does have a lot of experience using the flasher. Yesterday in the ESL Runners-Up Cup, he, well, I hope that button is still on his steering wheel because he used it quite extensively. And he's not stopping there. Oh, and Loreto's round in the left-hander. That's what we said before. Struggling a bit to get back on track, but Ariel Almeida now with a big gap to Loreto, of course, in third.
Yeah, it's a tricky corner. It's deceptively hard to take that corner.
Yeah, and especially if you have a charging Tim Schroeder in your rear mirror, that might also be a bit, well, challenging. Yeah.
Because you come out of the corner before, which I think is 13, and you're just starting to get back on the power through 14, and then you come to 15, which tightens, goes uphill, levels off, and you're trying to slow down at the same time. So your weight is kind of all transferred onto the front of your car as you're turning in, and then you come over the crest of the hill, and the back end just starts to slide out. and by that point you're on a roller coaster. You've got no control over what's going on.
I'm not sure if I'm tripping or if Tim Schroeder is actually getting much faster each lap. He's just so on the edge right now, pushing the car to the limits, but also just driving it so confidently. He's getting a bit of oversteer out of some turns, but he's just applying the right amount of counter steer to catch it previously. You can again see the back kick out a bit to the right. But
his lap times have been very consistent. He's definitely enjoyed having fun with it.
Might be someone to watch for future prototype content. I think he's also been very fast in the Thursday time trials with the Praga, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was. He definitely seems to favour the downforce cars. They must suit his driving style a bit more. I know I am not a downforce car person. I enjoy driving the Praga, but I'm not fast in any car, let's face it. But I'm definitely not fast in any of the downforce cars.
That's why you're here with me in the booth, because we are not the fastest, I guess. But yeah, he's looking so strong here today. Dominic Ladler, of course, he's not having a bad day as well. We had a few struggles in the earlier stages of the race, but if you compare his driving to Tim Schroeder, and especially if you know how Dominic Ladler usually drives, then this is like separation of worlds between the two of them. Even though he's also seemingly getting more confident time after time.
It can be an interesting time to try and build confidence when you're in a race, though, can't it? Because you're trying to go quicker, but you don't want to do anything stupid. And if he hasn't had a lot of practice and warm-up, then it's a difficult time to try and experiment and find that a little bit of extra pace.
Meanwhile, we should get close to the times where we see some pit stops. Tim Schroeder is keeping it out of the pits for this lap. So does Ariel Almeida. He's, of course, one lap down, meaning he can drive one lap longer.
Yeah, Ladle is just coming up to Lap Loretta now. It's, hopefully he doesn't have a repeat of what happened when Schroeder did.
But Lala is coming into the pits.
Oh.
To the right-hand side of the track. There's your pit limiter speed. You can see him parking and being at, and he does change both tires. That's very interesting. So let's see how Tim Schroeder, if he will respond this lap or next lap. Oh no, actually Dominic Ladler is going on. He didn't change tires.
No, he just refueling.
So it's a splash and dash for Dominic Ladler, of course. 15 minutes to go if your tires still feel good. That's one thing you can do. What will Tim Schroeder do? He should be coming in this lap, I think.
He's just got fastest middle sector.
So he's not coming in. Yeah.
He's obviously still feeling pretty comfortable with the car.
The gap was 29 seconds before Ladler came in. So if Tim Schroeder decides to change tires, it will be close between the two of them. Let's not forget there's still the possibility of speeding in the pit lane. I mean, we hope that this doesn't happen this time around, but it's still the possibility that it might happen. Lloyd staying out for another lap as well. But of course, if you don't change tires, you are used to what you have. It's pretty much like staying in the car in an endurance race. Because you know what you can expect. Meaning you can pretty much push right off the box. Sure, the car's a bit heavier. But apart from that, it's not really an issue or something you need to get used to again.
Yeah, it's not like you've got to get used to a whole new set of sticky rubber anymore. It's going to behave fairly similar, and you should be back on pace pretty quickly. Your tyres will cool down a bit in the pit lane, but not too much, especially with a short stop like that.
But this time Tim Schroeder's coming in.
Yeah.
Heat and tidying into the pit lane. Of course, having the pit box a bit later than Ladler. He actually has to be adjusted a long way. He stopped way too early. In the car, you get red markings on where you have to stop. And he also just goes for fuel.
Yep.
That's Amede going through to relap himself.
He got 3.5 seconds added time for not aligning with the pit box, which, given the gap he had...
That was Loreto locking the fronts when entering the pit lane. Going in a bit hot. It's a bit tricky. You have to brake from a very high speed on this track.
Yeah, and you don't want to brake too early because that's like giving free time to people. But then if you're starting to make mistakes, then it's just giving time away anyway. It's a difficult one to make.
Tim Schroeder 70 seconds in front of Lala. That's... You don't see that. Oh, no. Just corrects himself. That's because of the pit stop, of course. But still, 34 seconds. That's a huge gap to build in 40 minutes. So heads up to Tim Schroeder.
I don't think Loreto did a stop there.
Seems like he just did a drive-through, right?
Yeah, I think he stopped, but it didn't bring his car up on the jacks. He's still only got 4 liters of fuel in the tank.
Ariel Amede is coming back into the pits. Maybe he got a drive-through. He's also going a bit wide there. Of course, if you get too many off-track and incident points, you will get a 5-second penalty. If you do it too often, you will get it for drive-through as well. So that's also a possibility in this case. But I think unless Tim Schroeder does major mistakes, he's got it in the bag.
Yeah, I mean, he's been very consistent early on. I can't see him making too many mistakes now. Amede is in the pits and he is adding tyres. He's having his tyres changed.
Loreto's also coming back into the pits. Maybe not too hot this time around. So you can hear Amede
taking it a bit easier.
So Amede coming out of the pits, Loreto coming into the pits. Very long pit lane in Fuji. Of course, as a driver, that's always very painful, especially if it's such a high-speed straight.
Yeah, watching your speedo as you're going down the pit lane in Fuji is torturous. You seem to be going so slowly, especially when you can hear the cars going past. Yeah, Almeida's changing. Oh, sorry, Loreto's changing tyres as well. They both did fairly good stops, though. Nothing really in the way of added time.
The only one who struggled a bit was Lala, actually, which is surprising to see. But as we still got 6.5 minutes in this race, so now Loreto is driving again, coming out of the pits soon. We got a few updates on the ranked or RENNSPORT schedule for the next 2 weeks. Of course, this RCE or each RCE bringing schedule to an end, as by tradition for the last 4 months. And we got a changed up schedule, so a few things will change from what you're used to. And this is it. So the next 2 weeks, we will run a few different races in that regard. We have reduced the numbers of feature races to 1 at 16:30 in the noon in the Porsche Cup, at the Nürburgring and Hockenheim in Exchange during the week. And instead of the second feature race, we will have 2 multi-class races per day. One being at 7 p.m. with LMDH and GT3 at Spa. So very well, a combination you might be used to already. And
it's always a popular track.
yeah, it's a very popular track, very popular cars. So expect a lot of Hypercar and GT3s together. And on the other hand, there will be on 9:30 p.m. at the Nürburgring Praga and front-wheel drive series. Of course, in terms of looks, you can distinguish either by watching or looking at the cars in the column or by the color. The colors are the same as you find in the app or in-game for each respective class. The Nürburgring combination might not be the favorite for beloved Lucas Bender, but I'm sure many of you might enjoy that. Also in the sprint races, there, as you can see, the time has been increased to 15 minutes, from 12 to 15 minutes, and 2 races have been increased to 25 minutes, so you have a longer sprint race you can drive each half an hour, up to your liking. If you have any feedback or want to just try it out, make sure to head on over to the Discord.
Yeah, there's going to be some interesting combinations for sure. I think Spa is always popular. It always has been in GT3s, and I'm sure GT3 and Hypercar will be no different.
Yeah,
it being a 40-minute race, it could lead some really interesting racing from that.
Will also be a bit of a test ground to see how many different classes can work together on one track.
Yeah, the end of the Kennel Straight will definitely be an interesting one in an LMDH car, the Hypercars.
Yeah, and depending on how further test will go, we will also increase the limit of cars for the RCEs to 24, but you will be updated on that on the Discord. But now, as we have only 4 minutes left to run in this race, and it's Tim Schroeder still in the lead of this race. He's approaching Joao Loreto to lap the BMW driver.
He's been doing some fast laps recently. His last lap was invalid, but it was a 1:29.2, which is half a second faster than he's done a lap before. He definitely came out of the box swinging. He's not slowed down.
He never looked back as well, so he had that one fight with Ladler in the start of the race. It was a very valiant effort by Ladler to try and go around the outside.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't really meant to be. Just as Tim Schroeder is now passing Arameda, who doesn't really want to take the slipstream from the Dutchman, which is very interesting to see.
He's maybe scared of screwing up the braking at the end. You don't want to take out the leader.
As we will be right back with footage in just a second. So you can take another look at the schedule.
Like I said earlier, I've always been a fan of the Praga. I like driving the Praga. I like driving the TCX cars as well. So I think that people who hate Nürburgring aside, I think that could be a really fun race.
Well, I very much agree with you there. In contrast to many of my colleagues in the sim racing world, I actually absolutely love Nürburgring. It just has a lot of characteristics to it that I really like, but well, on the other hand, I also know a lot of people who don't, but I think that's unfair.
We do seem to have a vocal contingent on the Discord who do not like the GP track for Nürburgring. I'm not the biggest fan of the chicane we have in it in RENNSPORT. I prefer the other chicane a lot more, but I can live with it.
I mean, as someone who grew up watching DTM, I of course prefer the short chicane as well, so I might have been a bit biased. As we have 2 laps to go in this race, unless Tim Schroeder decides to just shorten the race by one, he has the time to do so, but I doubt he will do.
He definitely does. he could have waited out the clock if he wanted to.
Let's maybe take another look on board with him, just to see how quick it really is. Taking the curb there on the right hand side, getting up to the cone on the inside, and then this long right hander which you basically drive as a double apex turn. Bit of a lifting moment there. And this braking zone is just so tricky, so easy to lock the left hand tires. Come off a long right hander, fast right hander, so the left side tires are loaded and they suddenly unload them. So easy to do mistakes.
Yeah, I think it's the hairpin, turn 6. Was an early spinning point for me a lot when Fuji first came out. Again, because it drops off and turns at the same time, I just seem to lose the back end more often than not round there.
Yeah, it seems Arameda has DNF'd from this race, unfortunately.
Oh, so
it was in sector 1 and then just disappeared off the timing screens. Maybe we can find out what happened to him. And it was a crash, actually. But we are now on the final lap. So 1 minute and 30 seconds left to go for Tim Schroeder. We're not even quite that.
He's still putting in fast laps, but he's obviously decided to use up some of his incident points because none of them seem to be going valid anymore.
Well, that's peak sim racing or peak sim racer mentality. To use everything you have. I mean, you are all familiar with the terms in some high-level motorsports like Formula 1 or DTM or whatever you are watching around the world that, well, more famously said, you've got 2 strikes left. You've got 1 strike left. That's how, pretty much all race car drivers work.
Yeah, I've heard GT3 drivers before saying if you finish with track limits warnings, then you didn't go fast enough.
Indeed, you haven't been trying hard enough, but Tim Schroeder definitely tried hard enough and won this race. Congratulations to him. His first RCE victory. It will be Joao Loreto completing the podium in the BMW after Ariela made his unfortunate crash. But Dominic Ladler, I think you can still be happy with this race. He had a lot of struggles in the beginning stages of this race, but since then...
Yeah, he's had some good consistent laps out of it. He's definitely not been slow. He's been a lot faster than I can drive, that's for sure. Not that that's saying much. But yeah, the Tim Schroeder just seemed to have clicked with it today and just got faster and faster as the race went on. Loreto maybe wants to have a quiet word with his crew chief afterwards because he seems to have finished with 35 litres in the tank. Maybe overfueled.
Well, that's better safe than sorry, I guess. So, yeah, it's very interesting to see a lot of stuff that happened in this race. I think it was a good show for the new content, which of course can all enjoy.
Pit stops in action.
Can all enjoy that for free in the game. So make sure to join RENNSPORT.gg on Discord, on the socials, wherever you want to join. And we also have a fancy trailer, of course, for the next event. And I'm not cocky. But the next event in 2 weeks. Of course, next week we will also have the final race of the RENNSPORT Community League, which will be back in Hockenheim, where we hopefully can announce the next season in line as well. So if you like to drive more GT3s, make sure to check that out. We also have the next week we don't have the ESL I1 Runners Up Cup, but the week after we will continue with that, which will also be very interesting. And do you want to add something to today's race?
No, it was a good race. I enjoyed watching it. It was good to see the pit stops working. All hats off to Tim Schroeder, really, for going so fast. But also Hockenheim, which we're racing next week. If you want to get some practice in for that, then RENNSPORT Weekly Leagues on Tuesday night. It's a 60-minute race at Hockenheim.
Well, what a product placement. And with that said, thank you all for watching, and until then, have a great time. There's still ESLR1 running right now if you want to see more RENNSPORT content. And until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.